Hello, guys, and welcome to episode 20 of AuroraCast. So the reason I'm doing this is partly for OCD reasons. I just could not let season 2 start when we still had like 19 episodes. I'd always planned for 20 episodes, and this is episode 20. So welcome to episode 20 of AuroraCast. So yeah, it's just me in me studio. Kind of it's a bit messy at the moment, but you know, there's some stuff in the background. It looks cool. I'm happy with it. Whatever. So yeah, I wanted to just do a bit of a debrief on season 1, end it on 20 episodes, talk you through into season 2, kind of, you know, not so much failures. There's no real failures in the podcast, just stuff that's changed, stuff that's going to be moving forward, and perhaps where we're going to be going into season 2. So, I mean, the reason I started the podcast was basically because of the lockdowns. I realised that we weren't going to be going anywhere for a while. I realised that I wasn't going to be able to see any of my kind of creative friends for a while. And I thought, this is probably a good thing to start. I've always kind of appreciated the podcast world. I think it's something of wealth. I think it's a good thing. I think it's interesting in terms of a long format, new medium. I think it's given us an opportunity to learn about people, to talk to people, to expand and grow. That's not been done before across the spectrum. You know, if you've got someone that you admire from who's a celebrity or someone who you don't have access to, you know, I mean, even a good example would be that documentary on Netflix, The Social Experiment, I believe it's called, which is all about social media. Tristan Harris is the guy who is behind that. And I kind of found his podcast with Joe Rogan sort of more interesting than the documentary in itself. While the documentary had all the graphics and the sort of supporting narratives around what he was trying to say, I think the 3-hour podcast, which is like double the length of the documentary, with the guy himself, with Joe Rogan, was like a really cool way of actually sort of learning about the guy himself and really getting into the nitty gritty of what he meant. You know, like a lot of that kind of film, The Social Experiment, like I kind of knew, if that makes sense. So while it was presented in a really swanky, you know, new way, and you know, it drove the narrative visually, and it kind of painted the picture, so to speak, the podcast was more interesting, and I actually got more from it. So I was late to the podcast world. You know, I knew podcasts were a thing, but I never listened to them. I never really had the apps. I never paid much attention. And it was definitely kind of just pre-lockdown, into lockdown, that I was listening to tons of podcasts. And now it's kind of it's a thing. It's something I do all the time. So it's great to have my own podcast, and I think it's something I'll always keep. But it's just interesting to look back on perhaps the motivations why I started the podcast, what it's meant for me and other people I've interviewed and spoke to, and what it potentially means moving forward. So, you know, I knew we were going to be in this period of isolation last year. At the time of recording this, which is the 8th of September 2021. I was going to say 2019 then, because the world's gone mental and it seems it's almost like 2020 didn't exist. So I keep getting the dates wrong in terms of the year. But unfortunately, I think we're going to go back into a lockdown next month during October, which isn't great, but I think it's going to be a thing. That's perhaps a conversation reserved for another podcast with someone. You know, this is more of an updatey, talky podcast with me and you guys. But it was really useful for me to start this. And I think it's been useful. It was useful for the people I got on as well. I mean, I got a lot of messages post the fact that, you know, Mike, I was really nervous. It's something I've never done before. That's great anyway. Like, life's nerve-wracking. We have job interviews. We have band rehearsals. We have graphic design briefs. We have film composer briefs. We have film scores. And it's all scary. It's all unsure. So the fact that people were finding it nerve-wracking was a good thing, in my opinion, because it kept that sort of human what's the word I'm looking for? It kept that human experience alive of, really nerves and nervous energy is part of being a human being, is part of being alive. So the fact that people were nervous, I was like, well, cool, I'm giving you a purpose. And people, it was great for me to have in the lockdowns. It was great for me to have something in my diary, this podcast with this person. And I think it was great for them as well to have something to focus on, something to prepare for, something to focus, get going for themselves. So that was really cool. I think part of the reason it slowed up is that we did open up, and I obviously had to structure my life and start projects and get out there in the world again. And other people had the same. So a lot of people I was approaching, would you like to do a podcast? It's like, yes, Mike, I'd love to, just not right now. And I was like, yeah, I totally respect that. I totally understand that. But moving into season 2, there's going to be some people I've not spoken to before, in terms of I've known them online, but not really had a chat. There's going to be some old folks. We'll catch up with what they have been doing now compared to what they were doing. I'll be interested to see how those two things line up. Has anything changed? Has anything stayed the same? Has anything moved on? Has their expectations moved? Where are we currently placed? Gear changed. I mean, I dropped about $1,500 on microphones and compressors. I'm currently talking through a channel strip, which seems to be working very well. Got another one of them coming. Cameras I want to step up. But yeah, I've got a few of these arms and a couple of these mics. The possibility of doing this in person is very much real. I think we saw that with Andrea's podcast and with Rick's podcast. That was in person in here, which was fantastic. I think it worked better than over Zoom or Skype. I think the fact that people were in the room is something that you can't break, so to speak, is something that's really important, is something that the human interaction of two people actually in a room really works. So I want to expand on that, maybe taking the podcast on the road, which is possible, going to different locations and meeting people who perhaps can't travel into London. I myself are potentially moving out of London, going sort of north or somewhere. So that's the whole thing. The online podcasts are probably going to continue. If I can do it in person, I will. So yeah, I found it really sort of cathartic in a way. I found it good to have something in the diary, like I say. And I learned a lot about people. I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with people. Like, I love people and I also hate them. People are very weird and they're very prickly and don't always make sense to me and whatever else. But when you're in this kind of situation where you're talking to someone, some magic sort of happens where you start unraveling. Like, what was interesting was talking to people who I knew quite well, and you find that through doing the podcast, you're kind of unearthing information that you'd never actually spoken about, even though you might have known someone for 10, 15 years. The podcast format seems to open up memories and parts of journeys in people's lives that can be explored and extrapolated into current, present, and future events really well. So I think, yeah, I'm fully on board with the podcast format, is what I'm saying. I think it's worked very well. I started a few things. I've left Facebook, and I started a Discord server, and I think you guys should join it. I think it's primarily about music production. And I know not everybody I interview is from the music world, so to speak. There might be graphic designers or videographers or film directors, but there's different channels I've made in cryptocurrency and film, in history, in philosophy, and there's also different chats. And it's kind of my alternative to Facebook in the sense that, well, there's no annoying adverts or irritating posts from people. It's a community of people who are talking and who are genuine people. So the Discord might be a cool thing. You guys should join. I would recommend you did. So I'll put the link in the show notes, both on YouTube and for the Droplet podcast, which will go out to all the networks. Patreon, I'm trying to build because I need the help. I really do need the help right now. So Patreon's really developing, especially if you're a music producer, a composer, And right now, if you're a Pro Tools user, that's something you want to jump on in the Discord and the Patreon, because I'm doing probably about 14 hours of content around Pro Tools and the template I'm using to compose and produce, which I think will be useful. So do jump onto that. And outside of that, let's just try and keep this going. Please share it if you're enjoying it. Help it grow, because it helps me to grow the podcast. I can get more people on. I can sort of focus more time on sort of doing this. But yeah, overall, it's been a very positive journey, and I think season 2 will build on what we've learned from season 1. But you know, I'm doing this for you guys. I'm doing this for an audience. Of course, it's for me as well and for the guests. But if you've got anything you want to add, or anything you want to kind of suggest, or anyone you want perhaps to come on, then just send me a message. Jump to the website, go to aepl.co.uk, go to michaelwbell.co.uk, join the Discord, join the Patreon. You know, send a message on Instagram or Twitter, and we'll get something going. So that's all I really wanted to say. I just wanted to have a little bit of a face-to-face just to round off season 1, move it into season 2, and say that basically the whole process has been very, very beneficial. And I hope you guys continue to sort of follow and join me on this journey and everybody else on this journey into season 2 and beyond. So yeah, look after yourself, guys, and I'll see you episode 1, season 2. Cool. Take care. Bye-bye.